these Hertz DSK 165.3. These are 160 watt two-way system. Comes with a woofer and a tweeter, as well as a crossover to separate out the lower and higher frequencies. Got the adapter rings. Ordered these from Hein on eBay. I got the 5.625s, which are the correct size for this speaker. Just going to do a quick check, make sure everything's here. First thing I'm going to do is just double check these speakers fit the Hein adapters. Just to kind of show you how these adapters work. So there's going to be some screw holes, or holes for screws that are on the speaker, and those will drill through into the Hein adapter once we've mounted the Hein adapter on the door. So the holes that are on the Hein adapter are what are going to snap on to the door, and then we'll drill through the speaker holes into the adapter that'll hold the speaker to the door. Anytime we're going to be messing with things that are electrical on the van, we've got to make sure we disconnect the battery disconnect, which is under the driver side by the foot pedals. Alright, yeah, so definitely starting here at the top, working your way around, continuing to kind of work towards this end. You'll see there's 2 clips at the top, 2 at the bottom, and then 2 down here at the far end that'll come out last. Alright, when disconnecting the wires, I'd recommend that you just support the door by leaving the bottom two hooks inside their slots. Two plastic hooks here. Let's see, I can pop them out. But these guys here, go ahead and leave them in the slot and just let the door kind of lean back. Okay, although I didn't need to take this off when removing the door, it does make it easier to get back on if you take off this little cap that goes over the door lock. And that you can just pry off by pulling back. Alright, driver's side has several connections for the mirror on my model for mirror controls and window controls. And those can be removed by just squeezing on the sides of the connector and pulling back. Oof. Not easy. A pair of pliers makes it a little easier. And just be careful not to go too hard. And this last wire here, which I believe is for the window controls, a little harder to see, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the door cable first. So we pop it off from this side here, just getting a flathead under it and lifting. Alright, so just pry up this little yellow clip that's holding the cable, and then you can pop the cable out of that. And I'll release it. Now leaving that yellow clip behind. Alright, then we can remove the door fully. Alright, so here's the stock speaker, and it's got the Molex connector going to it. We're going to pop that off by squeezing the sides, pulling it up. T20 Torx bit will remove the 4 screws. Okay, so before removing the A-pillar, we want to pop the cover off of this tweeter. So for that, get a putty knife or trim removal tool, slide it under here, lift up. The same on the inside there, and that'll come off. Alright, next we're going to remove the A-pillar. Just kind of pull back on this trim piece. We'll unhook the latch from down here. Alright, so if you find this annoying to have hanging around, you can use a T30 Torx bit and remove it. And that's what I'm going to do, get it out of the way. Alright, so this tweeter is kind of being held down here by this plastic piece, so there's a couple of Torx bits, one there, one back here. We're going to take those out and see if we can pop that out of there. There's one T20 up here. There's another one just down past that. And that's enough to lift this up and pop the tweeter through. Okay, and just pull the tweeter off of that connector. Should pop right off, and then we won't be needing this anymore, so we'll just tuck it away. Alright, next thing we can do is remove this rubber boot so we can fish some speaker wire up from where the tweeter is going to be placed and run that tweeter wire down to where we're going to mount the crossover by the woofer on the door. Alright, so to do that, we're just going to pull back on this rubber gasket here, expose the channel that runs up to the dash. That. Alright, the Hertz tweeters use a pretty thin gauge wire, so I went ahead and chose 18-2 speaker wire, which was the thinnest I could get. It's a little bit bigger than what the tweeter uses, but I think it'll work for doing a butt connection between these two. Okay, alright, so to run this 18-2 wire through speaker wire, definitely want to just get more than enough. You can always cut some off later. More than enough to go from the dash to so I got about 3 feet here. I'm sure it's more than enough. Cut it off later. Go ahead and take your fish tape, connect the speaker wire to that. Rubber gasket, and go ahead and fish this up to the dash. Alright, so you're going to want to go straight back to start, and then upwards. Okay. Might need to reach down with some pliers and try to grab it. Once you can grab it enough to pull the fish wire upwards, or try to get an arc in your fish wire so that it goes straight back and it'll arc up. Once you get it through, you can disconnect it on this end. Pull that speaker wire through. Pull your fish wire back out. Okay, and then the last thing, take this section, get through, pop the other end of the rubber gasket off, and then feed the speaker wire through that. And then the last thing will be feeding speaker wire through into the door channel. You might have to peel back this white material so that you can get to it. Alright, there's a thin brown ground wire here that kind of interferes, so you want to be careful not to pull on that too hard or anything when you're feeding this wire through. Alright, now this tweeter is going to fit into the factory tweeter slot nicely if you use the adapter ring that came with it. So go ahead and snap it into that adapter ring. Kind of have to line up the once you got in there, you're ready to go do a butt splice to the speaker wire that we fed from the crossover up through the dash. Alright, so on this tweeter, the red stripe wire is going to be positive, and the wire with no stripes is going to be negative. Alright, so we got those on, ready to go connect it to our speaker wire on the dash. Okay, now up on the dash, we need to get our speaker wire fed up through the tweeter hole. Right? And you want to be cognizant of where the dash panel makes contact with the plastic underneath. You don't want to crunch down on the wire. So there's a slot that's closer up to the front here where you can feed from that direction, and there's some clearance so that that wire can come on up through there. positive is going to be the brown, going to the red stripe wire on the tweeter. Negative is going to be silver wire going to the clear stripe wire on the tweeter. Both of those a test tug and shrink them down. And let's go ahead and pull butt slices through, drop the tweeter into place, click it in, and then any excess wire we can just kind of maneuver down into this cavity. Alright, so the crossover has an input wire that we're going to connect to the speaker wire that was feeding the factory woofer, and then it has a the crossover has a woofer output and a tweeter output. We're going to connect this woofer output to our new woofer speaker, and the tweeter output to the cable we fished through up to the dash for the new tweeter. First thing we got to do though is mount this somewhere here on the door, and for that we're going to use some zip ties. Now in order to zip tie this crossover to the door, I just peeked in and there's an unused hole right here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a little bit of this white material back so we can zip tie in and around that and then back out. And then we can attach the crossover right here. Make sure the adapter is not going to bark out of that. Work out. Just tighten it that way. All right. Now to connect the input of this to the input from the spare head unit, first we're going to clip these on. Alright, on our factory wire we have brown and violet, which is going to be positive, brown and green, which is negative, and on the inputs of the crossover we've got clear and red, and then clear wire. So I'm going to use clear and red as positive. I'm using 2216 button connectors. These one at a time. It's a good solid grip. Go ahead and connect that. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and connect that to the brown and violet. go ahead and heat shrink these, and then we'll finish installing the woofer and connect the wires up. Alright, now we just need to tidy up these wires a bit. So the woofer wires, we're going to need to poke through and bring through this hole so they can connect to the woofer speaker. So the way to do that is just punch a hole here in this white material. Those terminal connectors through. Back around to this side here. I'm going to tidy up these other wires. Right now I'm just using some zip tie. Okay, once we have those wires out of the way, we're ready to secure the pine adapter to the door. So for that, we're going to use the Torx T20 bit. This is using the same screws that were on the factory. Okay, now the speaker's going to screw onto the adapter using these 4 screw holes, so you just need to line up, make your terminal connections. They're marked positive and negative on the back of the speaker, so make sure you hook your terminals up correctly. In that case, we have a little bit too much of this white material. If you're lucky, you have a little bit of that white material. It can prevent the speaker terminals from touching the metal, which will prevent it from grounding. It's not allow the speaker to work. Alright, before hooking everything back up, make sure you test the speakers out. Make sure the sound's coming out of the woofer and tweeter. And get excited. Alright, I cut out about a 22 by 24 piece of insulation that'll fit in here. If any of these green clips were stuck in the door and didn't come off with the panel, make sure you take them off the door, slide them back into the slot they belong to on the panel, And then you'll have to hook up the door cable pull first, then the electronic connectors for the windows and mirrors. Should be good to go. Also recommend leaving the speaker cover off as you put this back on, just to make sure you have enough clearance. You can do a little test check of that. These particular speakers from Hertz have just enough clearance, so they're okay, but depending on what speaker you have, you may need to actually trim the plastic on the inside of the panel. Alright, just a little tip when putting the A-pillar back on, to line up the fasteners that go into slots. It really helps to look in through the front window and watch those, line them up just right so you don't end up bending them out. Alright, I just wanted to show you guys how to get these collars off on the cable route that goes from the dash to the door. Originally it was pretty easy to get the plastic off of the collar, but in order to get the plastic back on the collar, you have to pop this collar off, and that is not easy. The way that I did it, I'll admit I broke one on the passenger side, but essentially the key is these little tabs here are what are holding it into the door, so you have to get a really tiny screwdriver and you have to get wedged between the door and there, get it in, and then push down on it. That's not easy to do, and you might get it on one, but then you need to get it actually on two of them to pop this thing out. If you get it on one and pull, you're likely going to break the second one. So once you get one to pop, then you need to rotate this collar till you can kind of get a angle to the second one, and then do the same thing with a screwdriver there. And once you get two, then the whole thing will pop out and you can put the rubber collar back on and then snap it back in. Okay, here we go on the bottom collar. This one's harder because you don't have as much visibility. So we're gonna this one not going. Try a different tool here. These things are a pain, I'll tell you. There we go. Yeah, so I just kind of went in at an angle, and basically you're trying to get this in and then to push that, which is not easy. I'm sure there's a better tool for this, but there we go. Whew. Alright, so these two little guys are what I popped out. Oh, great. I get the sunshine. Take this collar. Collar's got a bit of a lip on the inside that needs to go over the lip on the collar. So just kind of pull it up, latch it around there, and then I'll hold it and work your way around. Lifting and pulling, and on the back side, lift and pull. And then once you've got that collar, or once you've got the rubber going all the way around this collar, okay, there we go, in good shape. And you can push it back in, snap it in. Click. Alright, so we're gonna pop off this center speaker cover. And a Torx T20. Alright, we got two connectors on the back of this thing that we're going to pop off. Okay. See enough. Tuck those cables away. And put the screws back in for safekeeping. And then pop the grill back on.